Amen. Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, this sermon series, if you're visiting tonight, I know we've got some newcomers, and a very, very warm welcome to anybody who's new, for whom tonight is the first time you've been in the parish church. It's great to see you here tonight. We've just started a sermon series. Danny kicked it off last week. We're looking at the book of Proverbs. We're looking at wisdom that works. And so Danny gave us an overview, and one of the sort of take-home lines was he was quoting from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7. He said, "The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it costs you all you have, get understanding." So it's really, really important. And this series has really... We found it amazing, Lucia and I. We're sort of reading the passages every night. We're talking about it during the day. And as Danny said last week, it is so relevant today. This stuff was written 3,000 years ago. And it is just as relevant today, perhaps not being careful when you buy vineyards, but, you know, most of it is still so relevant today. It's been really good working through it. And I hope some of you are looking at Danny's Facebook challenge, the Proverbs challenge, the Facebook group that he's got going. And today, this evening, we're going to be talking about wisdom on marrying well. Some of you are probably saying, wow, Will, that's a brave topic to be talking about in front of your wife and your mother-in-law. Okay, but my mother-in-law is very gracious, and I'm sure she will keep any of her comments about whether I'm practicing what I preach to herself. Anyway, but this is not just for singles, okay? This is not just for singles. Because the wisdom of Proverbs isn't just about marrying well, but it's also about being well married. Because not only are we going to look to discover what to look for in a spouse, but what we should be as spouses. And I do appreciate whenever you talk about marriage, it's a difficult topic for some, and we'll be praying at the end into that. But nevertheless, it's an important topic, so here goes. But as I start, there is a trigger alert, okay? Trigger alert. As we look at this scripture, remember that the language is going to be orientated towards what a man should look for in a wife. You see, this was written 3,000 years ago when it was the men who were the ones doing the looking. The first few chapters all start off with, "my son." Okay, that gives you a little clue. Okay, that's the context. Because back then it was the men who did the looking, the men who initiated the relationship, did the courting and did the proposing. The burden of choosing fell on him, not her. Now, today it is entirely different. It is balanced. So you need to put some filters on as we go through this. Please don't come up to me and at the end and say, "Will, that was very biased against women," okay? Because where you hear the word man or woman, you can just reverse it, okay? Almost all of this is equally applicable to the other sex. So I hope that is clear. So we're going to start with the importance of marrying well. Here's a taste of what Proverbs has to say in chapter 18. "He who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord." In other words, so find a good spouse, you find a good life, and even more, the favor of God. Nothing wrong with that, is it? That's what's not to like. And in Proverbs 31, it says, chapter 10, "A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life." Now, marriage is the most significant relationship you will ever have. The most significant relationship you will ever have in life is with your spouse. If you get married, that is. It's the most intimate, the most lasting, it's the most strategic, the most critical relationship you will ever enter into. It's the one that can give you the most joy and the most pain. It can fill your heart or it can break your heart. Nothing should be entered into more carefully, more soberly than marriage. So that's number one. Proverbs wants to see us put the bar high. But what is that bar? What do you look for in a spouse? The first thing Proverbs would suggest has to do with character. Proverbs 11, chapter 22 says that a beautiful woman who lacks discretion is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. That's great, isn't it? A beautiful woman who lacks discretion is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. And in Proverbs 12, verse 4, we read that a wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. So remember, for man, you can read woman. Now, it's easy to talk about character, but do we really know what it means? And these two verses give us two D words, discretion and disgrace. The word discretion has to do with judgment, making wise choices and good decisions. It involves the ability to judge and act properly, someone who is careful in what they say or do. The opposite is someone who acts disgracefully. So we're given two powerful words, discretion and disgrace, but that's not all. We're given two quite powerful images. We're told that a woman may be beautiful, but if she acts without discretion, she is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. So what does that do to the ring? Well, I think the beauty of the ring is wasted. That's the point of it. In fact, she is no longer beautiful. Which brings us to the second image. She is like decay to her husband's bone, or he is like decay to his wife's bones. You can swap them around. That sounds dreadful. It sounds like bone cancer. So when you think of someone for marriage, notice how they act. Notice how they behave. Notice them in public, how they handle certain situations, how they react. Are they a disgrace? Or are they discreet? So you need to look for character. Then comes personality. And one personality trait in particular, and this one absolutely cracks me up. For example, in Proverbs 19, it says, "A quarrelsome wife is annoying as constant dripping." And again in Proverbs 21, it says, "It's better to live alone in the corner of an attic than with a quarrelsome wife in a lovely home." It's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining wife. It absolutely nails this thing about being quarrelsome. And of course, it's not just about having a quarrelsome wife, it's about having a quarrelsome husband as well. Now, I reckon there's some quarrelsome men about. Can I see anyone know any quarrelsome men who living with, actually, I can't ask that question because you can't, if you nod and your spouse is here, you're going to be in deep trouble. Now, someone who is quarrelsome, is someone who is constantly stirring up dissension, They are always creating conflict. They are always trying to pick a fight. They are easily offended. They are almost eager to be wounded. They tend to take things the wrong way. They get their feelings hurt at the drop of a hat. Whoa. Anyone met anyone like that? Yeah. Don't get married to them. So why so much about this one trait? And the answer is, because this is marriage, and quarrelsome people are a nightmare to live with. In fact, the imagery here should highlight how awful it would be to be married to someone who is like a constantly dripping roof. It's better to live on the edge of the attic or in the desert with someone like this. So watch out for people who are needy, hypersensitive, quick to take offense, eager to be wounded. Watch out for constant moodiness, people who just can't seem to be happy. Look out for those who see the cup as half empty, never half full. People who are set off over every little thing. They are difficult to live with. So what should you look for? Well, we're going to look at Proverbs 31 now, and this chapter in Proverbs has taken on a whole life of its own. There are ministries, I think probably in the USA, called the Proverbs 31 ministry. If you Google it, there's all sorts of stuff about Proverbs 31. You can go to Christian bookshops, you could buy posters to stick on your wall with Proverbs 31. And the reason is because of this chapter is something of an outline for a godly, attractive woman. But as I mentioned, also a lot for men to learn about being a godly, attractive man. Now, I'm just going to skim through some of the verses, starting at verse 10. Who can find a virtuous and capable wife? She is more precious than rubies. Her husband can trust her, and she will greatly enrich his life. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She is like a merchant ship, bringing her food from afar. She gets up before dawn to prepare breakfast for her household and plan the day's work for her servant girls. I get up early in the morning to lay the table, okay? Just that. She goes to inspect a field and buys it. With her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She is energetic and strong, a hard worker. She extends a helping hand to the poor and opens her arms to the needy. She's clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. When she speaks, her words are wise, and she gives instructions with kindness. She carefully watches everything in her household and suffers nothing from laziness. Her children stand and bless her. Her husband praises her. Charm is deceptive, and beauty does not last, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. The only thing that is missing there is, and they walk on water. I mean, that is quite a list, isn't it? It's pretty impressive, and it really does sound like perfection, doesn't it? We're going to very quickly look at 6 basic characteristics that we can draw out of those verses that we should look for. So here they are. Husband and wife should be hard-working. You see, laziness is a killer. It infects every aspect of our life together, what you can achieve, how well you can live, what you can accomplish for and with your children. There are all sorts of different kinds of laziness. Not wanting to exert yourself, not wanting to push yourself, not wanting to stretch yourself, not wanting to challenge yourself, not wanting to go the extra mile, not wanting to ever take responsibility, not wanting to do what it takes to care for themselves or others. I don't watch very much TV, but now and again I pick up these virtual reality shows filmed on really tragic dive estates somewhere in the UK where everyone is unemployed and it's the second generation who has never known meaningful work. It is utterly tragic what a lack of work and, in a sense, enforced laziness does in terms of the destruction of the family. A willingness to work is an important mark of character. Then there is stewardship. A husband and wife should have a commitment to stewardship. Someone who you cannot trust with your credit card, I would suggest, is someone probably to be avoided. Okay, I'm not going to ask who doesn't let their other half have access to their bank account or credit card, but you know what I mean. You've got to be good stewards. Now, this isn't meaning you need to be a financial whiz kid. You just need people who are careful, disciplined, and thoughtful, because irresponsibility in this area can lead to all sorts of drama. Third, I think this is a really lovely point. They should have a tender heart. They should have a tender heart. They should be gracious, giving, and caring. Someone who isn't callous, isn't self-serving, isn't cold or indifferent to the needs and emotions of others. Because if they're like that, it will kill a marriage. It will deprive the marriage of the fuel, the energy it needs to thrive. You watch someone, how they are with people who are the have-nots, who are the disadvantaged, the poor, the defenseless, the vulnerable, and you will have a window into their hearts and how they will be towards you. Fourth, they should be people who try and take care of themselves in terms of their bodies and their appearance. Not in a flashy way. You won't find a hint of that in any of these verses, but in a wise way. My daughters are kind of entering that zone when they think through what they're going to be wearing. And what I will be saying to them, what Lucia will be saying to them is this: you can dress attractively without dressing to attract. You can dress attractively without dressing to attract. I hope you can see the difference between those two things. Caring about your appearance means you care about your reputation. You care about how you are perceived. You care about how your spouse feels when they are with you in public. If you dress for the attention or to get looks from strangers, then it ceases to be virtuous and just becomes worldly. Okay? Then there's another mark from Proverbs 31 that has to do with wisdom. Now, a wise woman or a wise man has nothing to do with academic qualifications. It has nothing to do with how many GCSE, A-levels, or degrees you have. A wise person is someone who has a Christian mind, who acts biblically. When you ask them something, their answer is going to be informed by the Bible, their own walk with God, and their life of prayer. Theirs will be a measured response. I will never forget, after my wife died, I went through a period of counseling, and I was seeing a counselor who was not a Christian, and at one stage she advised me to get out and to basically have a whole series of affairs. That was her advice to me to get me over the trouble I was in, was basically just go and sow some wild oats. So that is a really good example of a lack of Christian wisdom. It might have been, I can't even think it was, but potentially it might have been wise by the standards of the world, but it was absolutely biblically the wrong thing for me to have been encouraged to do. And luckily, I kind of ceased that counseling relationship from that moment on, because I realized it was just going to get me into deep water. So wise people do not talk first, they think first. They are not constantly having to clean up their words or interactions. They don't give you what the world says, but what God might say. That is so important. Finally, and perhaps the most important, the person we should look for is not necessarily charming or beautiful. In fact, we are warned, do you remember that verse? We're actually warned not to be taken in by such things, but instead they have an inner beauty. I think we've all been around people who, when we first meet them, they might not bowl us over by their social skills, by their conversational abilities, by their witty repartee, their banter, or indeed even their looks. But the more we are around them, the more we see how really beautiful they are. Their inner world radiates beauty. And over time, that translates into our view of their physical beauty. Whereas the person who only has outward charm or only physical beauty doesn't wear well. And soon their beauty fades, and I don't mean through aging, but their charm becomes cheap. Whew. So now we have walked through all of that. What are some takeaways beyond what we've already covered? So in other words, some pastoral advice, okay? First of all, for those who are not yet married and believe at some stage they will be called to be married, set the bar high and do it by knowing what you are looking for. Use Proverbs 31. Use what we have discussed today. You will never find perfection, okay? So please don't have a little checklist, because you will never get every box ticked. But do consider carefully what we've talked about tonight. This will prevent you from being swept away by the two things that are specifically mentioned as not mattering: charm and beauty, which is what most people fall prey to. Second, take your time. There's a great saying: marry in haste, repent at your leisure. I think dating today is completely messed up. It's been turned 180 degrees. You see, it starts where it's supposed to end. It usually begins with the romance and the physical intimacy. And then it ends long before it gets to where it is supposed to begin, which is with friendship and knowledge of someone's character and personality. Did you understand that? You know, it's the wrong way round. You start with a physical intimacy, and 9 times out of 10, it ends before you even get to know about the character, the really important stuff. You have to give it time to check out the biblical advice. Believe me, it takes time to see the kind of situations that reveal these things we're talking about. So take time. And don't think that when you marry somebody, you're going to be able to whip them into shape. This is another classic misconception. Don't think that by marrying somebody, you're going to be able to sort out their character flaws, because here is the truth. Whatever path they're on, whatever character flaws they have now, will probably only intensify. Yes, Christ can work some amazing and powerful change in people, but if they aren't cooperating with Christ now in these areas, why do you think that marrying them is going to suddenly start the process off? Because the chances are it won't. And finally, a word to those of us who are married. Now, rather than hear all this and feel defeated by all that you are not, or discouraged by all your spouse isn't, take wisdom of Proverbs as a set of goals. Have that Proverbs 31 kind of list up on your fridge or whatever. Use them as guidelines, use them as goals, some kind of roadmap to self-improvement as a way to enhance your marriage, as well as coming on the marriage course, which we hope will be run in the new year. And as you look through Proverbs 31, exchange man for a woman, okay? Please, guys, you are not off the hook here. Anybody, any males who are married here tonight, you are absolutely not off the hook. In fact, I'm going to point out like that, because when I point out, I've got 3 fingers pointing backwards. And I know my wife will hold me to account on this one. You know, if you're quarrelsome, you probably don't know it. You probably know it, rather. So get to work on it. Make some changes. If you're lazy, if you're constantly procrastinating, sharpen up your work ethic. Get a little more organized. Spend more time alone with God. None of this is beyond anybody's reach. Proverbs 31, men and women are not born. They are developed. And they are the ones who put themselves on the track to that development. Because these things are part of God's plan for all of us. And it can revolutionize a marriage. So, marry well and be well married.